evening. Called the Ames Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Policy Committee meeting to order. And Councilmember Corriere let me know that she'll be running a little bit late this evening. I don't see Mr. Zillen yet, but when he comes in, he can be seated. So, all right. Tony, you've changed. You look a little different. You look like Damien for some reason. I don't know what that is.
Tony's on a much earned vacation, so you got me tonight.
Very good. All right. So do you have anything you want to go over specifically this evening with us before we go ahead and move through items 1 through 5 on the agenda? Okay. I would ask the Transportation Policy Committee, do you have any questions for staff on the various materials that they presented to us in the packet? Okay. So we'll go to item number 1. I'm going to declare the hearing on the First Amendment to Federal Fiscal Year FFY 2019 to 2022 Transportation Improvement Program open. Is there anyone in the audience like to address the council on this, or the committee on this particular topic? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing and entertain a motion approving the First Amendment to the 2019-2022 TIP.
So move approval. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Carried. Item 2, motion approving draft of Second Amendment to FFY 2019 to 2022 TIP and setting public hearing date for July 9th, 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and second. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Number 3, motion approving draft FFY 2023 TIP and setting public hearing date for July 9th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
Move approval. Second.
All right, discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Item 4, I declare the public hearing on fiscal year FY 2020 Transportation Planning Work Program, TPWP, to be open. Is anyone in the audience that wishes to address the committee on this topic? Seeing none, declare the hearing closed and entertain a motion approving final FY 2020 Transportation Planning Work Program.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. And item 5, motion recommending City Council approval of the planning services agreement with HDR Engineering Incorporated, Omaha, Nebraska, for preparation of a 2045 long-range transportation plan update. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
All right, move to second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Policy Committee comments. Gloria, anything?
Nothing from me.
David? No, sir. Tim? Juan? Good?
Nope.
Nothing from me.
All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah.
I call the joint meeting of the Ames Historic Preservation Commission and the Ames City Council to order. And there's one item on the agenda, that's report of Historic Preservation Commission activities. So Ray, are you going to take the lead on this? Or who's
Actually, Peter is. He's
All right,
the chair of
Peter.
the commission.
gonna- Good evening.
Good evening. Over the last year, we've spent a fair amount of time. Basically, we review certifications for appropriateness from the historic district, as well as, I don't think we've had any, but it can also be from freestanding or individual designated properties. But this last year, we've also done a review of Chapter 31, which is the code section, code chapter that deals with historic preservation. It was revised 5 years ago, and so every 5 years we review that. As part of that, we looked through a number of approved certificates of appropriateness and realized that several of them had expired without being completed, and so followed up and contacted the people, and most of those did get extended then. That is something, as we're doing it, that there really is no process in Chapter 31 of follow-up and review like that, and so that's probably something we'll be recommending a change to the code. Other than that, the big thing that's happened in historic preservation this last year is the recognition of downtown Ames as a national historic district. And there's several implications of that that we feel may indicate that there's some additional things to be done. One thing, as part of our mission to educate people, we will be trying to schedule this fall a presentation by the State Historic Preservation Office on funding possibilities that are opened up for downtown property owners based on that designation. It does open up several funding sources, and we feel it appropriate to try to get property owners knowledgeable about what opportunities that gives them. The second thing, we'd like to see a project to do some signage, some recognition of the new designation downtown. And Lisa has been working with the Ames Historical Society and people that have been involved in some of the downtown plaques already. And so I'll let her just say a few words about that.
Yeah, so just briefly, I'm hoping to have two nice signs. If you're all familiar with the current signage that's outside of the train depot, the nice color plaque. Two similar to that on opposite ends of Main Street that really highlight the architectural significance of different buildings downtown and tell a story and hopefully, educate and provide some lessons to people that want to learn about downtown.
So we probably will be asking that there be some funding set aside to cover that. It's not going to be a real expensive thing, but it's not something that's part of our current budget. And so we'll either be asking that for next budget year, or if there's a possibility of something being made available as we enter into this coming year. Third thing is with the downtown now being a historic district, we feel like it may be appropriate to create some kind of more official link between the Historic Preservation Commission and the Downtown Facade Program, or Facade Improvement Grant Program. And not that we think that it's being ignored, but we just think that since it will now be an official historic district, that it may be appropriate that there be some kind of official link in there. Beyond that, we got an early start on our FY 2019 work plan, and working with Eloise of staff. There's been an update to the historic preservation portion of the city website, which we would certainly encourage everyone to look over. We think it now contains a lot more information. It does contain the background information about all the historic sites, the 2 historic districts, and as well as a lot more about the process. We think it now guides people into the certification of appropriateness process, and as well as giving people resources. There's links to some of the information sources for people to get involved. The other thing we'd just like to bring up is would like Ted to talk to you a little bit about that we feel historic preservation fits right into the sustainability efforts that the city council is making. And if you just...
Yeah, sure. I promise I won't take too much time, but I did want to just, if you'll permit me, I just wanted to read a paragraph that I pulled out of a document called Looking for the Greenest Building, Start with the One That Already Exists. This is a document, gray literature, government literature, nonprofit literature, by the Preservation Green Lab, which is a shop out of Seattle that's affiliated with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the nationwide nonprofit. They do a lot of work with green architecture, green urbanism, so sustainability both at the scale of buildings, but also at entire neighborhoods and entire cities. And I'll make this mercifully short, but building reuse typically offers greater environmental savings than demolition and new construction. It can take between 10 to 80 years for a new energy efficient building, a LEED certified building, to overcome through efficient operations the climate change impacts created by its construction. The majority of building types in different climates across the U.S. will take between 10 to 30 years to compensate for initial carbon impacts from construction. And so we talked a little bit as a group about this. I've worked in the field of preservation for about 25 years, mainly with government. Now I teach at the university. And what I'm seeing is that preservation has really kind of expanded beyond its historic realm and heritage, history, and commemoration and education. And we're getting tied more closely to sustainability, to planning, to economic development. We've been doing that for a number of years, to social equity issues. The field is growing. And I thought that our conversation with you guys would be a good opportunity to suggest that if there are ways that we can work with you, if we can work with other commissions, with other committees within this building to achieve some of these common goals, I think we would certainly be willing to do that. I think it's really our role to do that and not just designate historic properties, but to think more broadly about this field of preservation. So I appreciate the opportunity to just put that on the table today. So.
Well, the last thing I'd wanted to bring up is the city does have a strategic historic preservation plan. We are in the process of starting to look through that. And, you know, I think I've been on the commission for 5 years. There's some things on there that I don't even know whether the plan is about 11 years old, and 10 years old. And I'm not sure where some of these were addressed before I came on the commission. So that over the next several months, we're going to be looking through that, trying to decide what probably needs to be updated in that, whether it's just to recognize that some things have been accomplished, or possibly to determine whether they are still goals or appropriate goals. So other than that, I'd open it up to any questions you guys have for us.
Peter, is that review that you're doing the plan that was approved?
Yes.
Or is it the plan report that accompanied the plan that was approved?
It's the goals,
It's-
goals, objectives, and action steps.
Okay, so what
Okay.
the council voted on, because
Yeah.
it may be useful for the commission to review the plan report, which has other things rolled into it that were suggestions made
Yes,
by
I
our.
think we've seen that, but we
Chapter
haven't
5.
really started into.
Is specifically about preservation and planning, which gets at some of what Ted was talking about. I think the demolition delay ordinance was mentioned in there.
Yeah.
That was something that failed with a previous council. And neighborhoods figure in big, so it fits really well with the not the comprehensive plan. That's-
Well, looking through it, I know we've accomplished, just with the website update and we've accomplished a number of the action steps that were adopted just within the last couple of years. But, you know, I don't have the perspective. I don't think anybody currently on the board or the commission has the perspective as to what's gone on for the full 10 years. So we'll be working with staff to try to determine that and bring something back to you probably in several months.
One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is the ways in which some of our current ordinances may work against the preservation plan or against preservation efforts. And so just the review of some of the ordinances or urban revitalization plans that we have in place. I think Ted knows, I talked about that at the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions meeting, that sometimes we're incentivizing things that are in direct conflict with the goal to preserve. And I'd just like to know where those are in the municipal code. And it seems like the Preservation Commission would be the place to start looking at what might be points of tension or points where the commission dig in a little bit more and maybe look at Chapter 31, how it dovetails with what's being done in other parts of the code.
Okay. Anybody else have comments or questions? Peter, you talked about the signage, and also Lisa. Timing wise, do you have any thoughts in terms of when a sign might be ready to be looked at or to be implemented? Is that later on this year? Is that this calendar year? Or you mentioned next fiscal year, which would be FY 2021.
I think probably 6 months out would be a reasonable
Okay.
timeframe.
So if funding can be found within this coming budget, then I think we could go ahead. Otherwise, if we'll be requesting it for the following year.
Steve, do you have any comment on that in terms of whether or not that's something that they should just plan for a year from now, or?
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't hear. Was there an estimate cost of that?
I think we were talking in the $700 to $900 range.
Yeah.
Was
probably-
that per sign?
Yeah, 1,000 tops per sign, so about $2,000.
Yeah.
I'm pretty comfortable we could handle that in the July 1st budget year.
So when you get that put together, then why don't you bring that, send it back through, what channel you want to go through Ray or through planning or
Do you want that to come to the council or?
can that just be done at staff level? I'm trying to get them some direction to know where we're moving forward. So
We could do it at staff level. It's certainly authorized to do it. We'll make sure you support it. You could take a motion. We could get direction later on.
okay, all right,
I think bring it through Ray. We'll take care of it.
okay. So you don't need to wait till 2021 then. Sounds like you didn't vote on it, but I think I got a sense that maybe there's support for that. You talked about, Ted talked about the HPC sustainability efforts and trying to work with other committees. Coincidentally, I was just looking at some of our groups online, and we do have a sustainability task force. Is that something that you've worked with or talked to? Because that might be something with Mary Rankin and others that could possibly be, a compatible, dialogue if you're trying to.
I don't think we have in the past, but yeah, that's the kind of connections
Yeah.
we're trying to look at moving forward.
Because on that task force, there's building contractors and developers, businesses, civic organizations, Iowa State, residential, some faith-based, and NGO. So it's
Just to clarify, that task force was developed for a special project a couple of years ago, and while they all agreed to hang on, they haven't been given a task in a long time, so they haven't convened. So we could reconvene them, but we would need to probably update the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, I certainly think there's room, there's overlap in terms of what we do and what the Planning Commission does in other commissions. And so any opportunity to work with any of those groups, and I don't know in what capacity, but just to foster connective, discussions and collaboration between commissions, I think would be very
so you're
helpful.
just working through staff
Yeah.
and figure that out.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Good. All right.
I have one other question, which actually relates to what John was asking. And maybe this is a Ray question because he's got the institutional memory. Does the Preservation Commission have an approved monuments or markers clause now? We had talked about developing some sort of requirements for historical markers of various kinds, because people kept coming to us asking for new markers, and we didn't have a policy in place, and I don't know whether anything got developed,
No, we still don't.
because that might be something else that the commission would want to look at, since it is possible that you would be asked to do other historic markers of various sorts around the community.
Looking for a standardized design or when to use them.
Well, I think the question was, when do you approve a marker enough that you bring it to council? What are those markers like? Because people might want something that's really a crazy design for a marker. Are you looking for standardized markers, or are you looking for, whatever design somebody wants? Those issues would have been part of the policy, but then I don't know that anybody ever followed up on the policy after I left the commission.
No.
We had several requests within a couple of years for markers, and we didn't have a policy. And Steve likes a policy. I think the city as a whole likes a policy. So I don't know that we ever hammered out the details of what that policy would be, but
Okay. Anything else for Historic Preservation Commission? If not, thank you for your efforts and all your hard work, and appreciate your report. It was very informative, and appreciate where you're going.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
thank you.
We will go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn. All right. Adjourn. Okay, I call the regular city council meeting for May 28th, 2019 to order. And the first item on our agenda is a presentation of a lead certification for the new water plant.
Don't drop it. Costs a lot of money. It does look.
Pretty solid 5-inch thing.
That's an expensive item. Don't drop it.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. It's our privilege to be able to present the plaque to the Mayor and Council in recognition of the LEED certification that was received for the new Ames water treatment plant. The whole purpose that the city has a water and pollution control department is to protect public health in the. And so what we do as a department, as well as the city's sustainability goal, is really at the heart of the desire to have the facility be LEED certified. So very early on in the design, we talked about incorporating sustainability principles into it. But then when the state offered some money for doing things to promote green infrastructure, we approached them with the concept of obtaining LEED certification and what would they give to us in exchange for doing that. And hopefully in a few months, we'll be back here with the Iowa DNR and we'll do the big Publishers Clearinghouse check for you. But tonight, I just wanted to share a couple of the data points that went into getting the LEED certification for the facility. One of the points was that we needed to protect and preserve more than 50% of the project site using native vegetation. We're way over 50%. I don't even know what the number is, but way over. Energy consumption of the facility is 19% below the LEED benchmark that we needed to achieve. Water use is 28% below the LEED benchmark. 88% of all construction waste was diverted away from the landfill. 100% of the wood products used in the project complied with the requirements for the Forest Stewardship Council. And some of the additional points that we got were for things like providing low-emitting, fuel-efficient vehicles for staff use, utilizing low-emitting adhesives, paints, and carpeting in the facility, and a point for an innovative design that included using the cold groundwater being brought into the facility as a geothermal heat exchanger. So with that, Mr. Mayor, we'd like to present you with the plaque. It is significant. And I would like to acknowledge the other two folks from our team that are up here. Lyle Hammis is our water plant superintendent, and Christina Murphy is our assistant director for one more week. If you haven't heard, Christina is the new general manager for the West Des Moines Water Works.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Sorry to see her leave, but excited for where she's headed. Thank you.
Just as an aside, one of those historic markers that I was talking about was requested for the water plant site back in 2011, I suppose, or 2010. And I don't know what's happened with that, but.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the elements that we have to finalize to close out the SRF loan for the facility. So we're in the process right now of putting together a mock-up and making sure we got the proportions right.
Great.
John, what level was that? Was that a silver, gold, platinum, or?
It was a LEED certified was the
LEED
standard
certified,
that
yep.
we needed to hit, yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations. Okay. We'll move on to consent agenda, and council, I was informed just before the meeting that item 29, which is resolution approving contract and bond for power plant steam turbine number 7, parts procurement with mechanical dynamics and analysis, is being pulled by staff, so that will not be part of consent. Does council wish to pull any other items from consent?
I would move that we pull item 19.
All right, moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Anything else? Okay, entertain a motion to approve consent less item 19 and item 29.
John, I apologize. We have this new policy. We're supposed to vote on pulling. We did already. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we pulled, we did. Yeah, on 29.
You ready for motion?
Move consent minus 19 and 29.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried? All right. So. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. You need roll call on that.
Oh,
My
that's right.
apologies. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, item 19. Gloria?
So I pulled this item because I had a couple of questions about the project. And first of them was regarding that strip of land that's labeled as public right-of-way. Is
What
there,
attachment is that to the?
oh, that's, well, it shows on attachment A,
Right.
but it's also on, I think, attachment C.
Or E? E, I think it is. Isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have the attachments up in front of me right now,
Oh,
but
okay, I'm sorry.
but the strip that we're considering part of that to be removed, is there a reason that the city has never done a public walkway there like it was designated in the plat?
Yeah, I'm not sure the reason. The plat, I believe, dates back to the early 1930s.
Yeah, you don't know about that, John?
So no, I haven't. Yeah, that wasn't part of the history I was given, but so I'm not sure of why nothing ever proceeded there. But in the meantime, in the last 80 to 90 years, it's kind of been absorbed into the surrounding properties, and there's gardens and things like that in there. So it's kind of part of the neighborhood now.
Well, so my other question related to the pathway is, if we're selling off this one part of it, why aren't we making arrangements to sell off the rest of it?
It's really just by homeowner request. And in this case, they want to build a new garage. And so the garage won't be encroaching into that area, but to meet the proper setbacks, they need to obtain that 7-foot strip.
I think there was some other alleyway that we looked at where one person had requested part of it, and then we decided to look into whether we wanted to just sell the rest of it as well. And so I kind of wondered whether this might be one of those situations. I also wondered if the property at 635 Ag is going to have another curb cut since it's getting a new garage.
Yeah, they plan to remove their existing driveway and then put new curb and gutter there, and then just have one new driveway and curb cut for the new garage.
And does that trigger the addition of sidewalk around the property?
No, because this is single family, there really is no trigger to make us require sidewalk installation. In this area, this is pretty much the corner of Cessna and Ag, and there's sidewalk on the other side of Cessna and also sidewalk on the other side of Ag, but not up this section of block.
And so going back again to the issue of selling, is there any reason that the city couldn't sell off the rest of that right of way? There's nothing under there?
We could ask the surrounding neighbors, but typically we would wait for them to approach us. I think in the case that you were mentioning, it was actually an alley, so it was much wider, and it, if I remember right, was actually more defined, if you will, and not so much absorbed into the neighborhood as this narrow strip is. So I think we just wanted to clean that area up and see if the surrounding neighbors wanted to purchase that.
Okay. That satisfies me.
Okay.
I don't know if anyone else has any other questions.
Ready for motion?
I would move approval.
Second.
All right, move to second. Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Very good, thank you. Move on to public forum. This is time set aside for people to address council on any items that are not on the agenda that are specifically related to city business. So I declare the public forum open, and anyone who wishes to address council will be limited to 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to address council? Seeing none, we'll close public forum and move on to item 33, asset. Right?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight we have 3 items related to asset. The first 2 are items that we deal with each year. One is approving the contracts for the majority of the asset agencies. There were 2 agencies that didn't return their contracts in time. We're still working to get those squared away, and we'll bring those to you later. But we do want to get contracts into the hands of the other agencies. So that first item is approving contracts for next year. The second item relates to some modifications to the asset policies and procedures. Again, each year, asset staff gets together and reviews those policies and procedures and makes recommendations for changes. And once those changes are approved by a majority of the funders, they become effective for all of them. The biggest change involved here this year is the removal of Central Iowa Community Services from a role it has held for the past couple of years. Central Iowa Community Services funding operates differently than the rest of the asset funders funding. And so because of that, the decision was made by CICS to basically withdraw its funding from the asset process. It will continue to provide funding to services that are funded through the asset process, just outside of the current process. CICS will still maintain a coordination role, which will be very helpful for the remaining funders as we go forward into the future and try to coordinate the services and funding for mental health related services. The third item is unique. This is some follow-up from a special joint funders meeting that was held on May 1st. And I know a number of the council members and the mayor attended that joint funders meeting. Basically, that meeting was held to have a conversation among the joint funders about what we might do collectively to improve the asset process, to get better alignment between our goals and how the process operates, to strengthen that partnership. And out of that conversation, where I believe about 20 or 25 representatives of funders attended, there were a number of themes that emerged from the conversation, and we as asset staff sat down and tried to distill those into the key points for you. And really what we're asking for you, from you tonight, is whether you agree with our assessment about what the conversation was about and whether these are things you would like us to pursue as asset staff. I should note that there are really 5 pieces that came out of that. One theme related to this idea that asset funding shouldn't be the sole source of funding for a program, that there should be other areas of support to ensure that a program is viable and has buy-in from other community partners. A second theme that was that came through pretty strongly was the notion of using a community needs assessment as the justification for telling us which way we need to go with services and priorities into the future, where our funding needs to go to make an impact in the community. The third involved having a conversation to establish shared funder priorities, or perhaps some themes and consistent language among the funders about the different services that ought to be funded. The fourth was identifying really what are the core services that asset exists to support and provide, and are there services that are a little on the periphery that, while important, are not nearly as important as the ones that are that core set of services. And then the fifth was to identify among the funders shared outcomes and measurements that you would like to see the services held against, so that we can get a better sense of the impact that those services are making. So those are the 5 themes that emerged. We're asking each of the funders to weigh in on those themes and whether you think these are the things that you want asset staff as a group to pursue. I should note, this isn't something that will happen overnight, that will cause changes to the upcoming asset funding cycle. The intent would be that if the funders agree that these are the things that we ought to pursue, asset staff would go back and evaluate how we would study those concepts and how they might integrate into our current asset process and partnership. It might be a multi-year effort for us to make changes. And of course, there would be a lot of different alternatives for how we could accomplish these 5 concepts. So this would be the start of a lot of future conversations about how asset ought to move forward into the future. The Story County Board of Supervisors met today and confirmed that these were themes that they wanted to pursue. The council has that option again here tonight. If you think there are additional aspects that we missed from that conversation or other ideas you want us to keep in mind as asset staff as we go through the process of evaluating these pieces, this would be a great time to let us know. However, if you feel like we're radically off the mark, it may be difficult for us to have a game of telephone with all the funders individually, and we might have to call another joint funders meeting to settle out what we think needs to be addressed. So that's the gist of that special piece of this asset conversation tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Brian, can you remind me what the other organization is that receives money just from CICS besides Mainstream?
I think it's Friendship Arc Homes.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Under the first of the 5 topics you mentioned, having to do with the limitations, the intended limitations of asset funding. And maybe I should step back. I sort of understand most of these 5 topics as being kind of instructions to the volunteers on how to prioritize. Is that fair?
Well, you mean that each of the 5 items are instructions for the volunteers?
Sort of, yeah.
I think that some of them are going to require us to do some analysis and figure out how we might integrate those pieces. The first one, I think, is sort of a general rule, perhaps.
Maybe a gateway.
Yeah, I think that might be fair.
So my question about it is, this is the one that says that asset funding should be used as a source of last resort and other restrictions. Is there anything new about this? Is this a reflection of a long-standing understanding among assets, or is this something that you consider to be kind of new?
I think that it reflects. Various funders' thoughts about asset historically. I'm not sure all of the funders have collectively gotten together and said this is a core principle of how we want asset funding to be used. And so this is perhaps formalizing an idea that individual funders or individual representatives of funders may have talked about in the past. If this is a theme that the funders say, yeah, this is our idea about how asset funds should be used, I think, again, we wouldn't take this and make decisions with it right away. We would probably look at what kinds of instructions are we giving the volunteers? What kind of impact if we implemented this as a hard and fast rule, let's say, what kind of impact would that have to asset programs and services? Are there a significant number of programs that would fail to meet that test? I think we would have to assess that. And at the moment, we haven't really done a formal assessment of that. But it seemed to emerge in the conversation, which is why it's reflected here.
So I have some more thoughts about this, but I want to make room for other questions. And are we going to be taking input on this, or how is this working tonight?
I was just thinking in regards to that particular theme. I read it more as a desire to have our agencies have resiliency rather than saying that asset funding should be their last source of funding. Just rather, we want agencies that are strong enough to draw from several sources so that we're not the sole funder of them. So I guess I saw that more as a plea for resiliency and for the agencies we're serving.
This is a point that Amber's made. It's unfortunate she's not here, but she's made that point several times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's a goal that I would support as well. I'm not sure this language actually captures that as well as you just said it. But,
Thanks.
Brian, I wasn't able to be at that meeting. So was there anything other than this notion of resiliency that you thought was behind this? Because that's the one that I remember from the previous asset meeting that I attended and from what Amber has said repeatedly.
Well, the other aspect to that, and if you go to the memo that the asset staff jointly prepared, attached to the city manager's staff report, it details a little bit more what was heard that fed into that theme. There was some conversation about whether asset funding needed to be prioritized to existing services more so than new ideas, whether there should be some protection of the existing services, because we have this constant challenge of new services being proposed where the dollar amounts being requested would require pretty substantial cuts to existing services if we wanted to pursue them. And a couple of times during the conversation, there were ideas expressed from the funders that the existing services ought to be the ones that are prioritized here, not pursuing a variety of others, because there needs to be some stability. So that was something that was raised.
Okay. Any other questions for Brian before I take public input?
Well, one more question on this same topic, number one. And by the way, I do think that the memo characterizes quite well the conversation that took place at Asset. So it's not about that. It's I don't think we had the intention during that meeting to discuss as a council what we wanted to do with Asset. We sort of agreed on broad themes. And so one of the issues that I'm unconvinced about is whether we should categorically say that if the state or federal government removes a funding line altogether, then we're simply not going to be there. And I think that can happen either. And so I want to draw a distinction between, for example, if there's an agency whose own allocation of funding has been dropping due to reasons specific to that agency, then I would say we're probably not there in order to pick up the slack. But if we have an entire category of services that's being systematically reduced or eliminated, then I think that's something that we should be willing to look at. Doesn't mean we'll fund it, but it seems like that shouldn't be a showstopper for us. What does council think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to put it, right?
Yeah, I think there's been at least in the meetings that I have attended, there's been a distinction made between those entities, how delinquent in providing services or following up on paperwork or whatever, so that their money got reduced because of not meeting requirements, versus some program that's been cut entirely, so it had nothing to do with what the Ames organization or Story County organization did.
Okay. I will go ahead and open public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this particular topic this evening? Seeing none, we'll close public input. And council, my question is it more or less just a minor amount of wordsmithing? For example, in item 1 where it says in sentence 2, it should not replace lost grants. Would you suggest it should not necessarily replace? I mean, basically have a qualifier in there that's not just so definitive, that would still give you an option, and then maybe would still be the same. Asset funding should not be the primary source of funding. Just striking should not be used as a source of last, or should be used as a source of last resort. I mean,
Yeah.
I think what I'm catching is you're really trying to say the essence of what was talked about at this very profitable, great interchange. I think they did a good job capturing it. Maybe it's just trying to wordsmith this to hair. And Brian, if we did that, would that invoke going back to the county again and asking for their input, or what do you think on that?
I don't think that would be significant enough to warrant that, but we would certainly communicate with them that
Some minor changes
that
were made.
the sentiment of the council is slightly different than what was captured in the memo, and here's what it is. And give them an opportunity to respond if they feel that that's necessary. But otherwise, we'd be able to, as asset staff,
Because then that
forward
would,
with that.
because then the last sentence or last, sentence is, asset fund should support existing services before being used. So that would basically say, if you had something that lost state funding, you're going to try and still support existing services if they're still justified. So that's congruent as well too. So just trying to help move it along so we can give direction to the asset staff and try and capture your concerns.
That would work for me. I think that would address my concerns.
Well, aren't we just looking at the 5 themes? And theme 1 is there are limitations to asset funds.
If you go
Right.
further.
No, but that's a memo, right? We aren't voting to approve the memo, are we?
Well, the memo is the piece that all of the funders have. You have this additional staff report, which summarizes the memo.
Breaks them down. Yeah.
So then agreeing with the themes also means agreeing with the memo?
Well, I think
Is that-
we could express some proposed changes to the language of the memo. I mean, I think that's probably the best
Your point.
action there.
I
Your
just
point's
don't know
well
what's
taken. Yeah,
what
how
the
far do
status
you
of
go?
the memo
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Is that a document?
That's more
That's
official than the
real?
staff report for all the other funders.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like those proposed changes, adding some conditional words, taking out the source of last resort. Because I think, if you're saying we don't want it to be the primary and only source of funding, that goes far enough in saying that. And then saying something like it typically should not replace, or it typically should only go to existing services. Because to David's point too, if there were a service which is currently not being funded through asset because it is being covered by federal or state monies, and that were to start being wiped out on the federal state level, that would be a new service, but the need would be very great. So
I see your options of either giving you direction on specific wordsmithing or just give Brian some general
Yeah, I mean, I
direction.
think
Yeah,
Let's
Brian's
get
got
into
it,
it.
but-
Yeah, if that's,
I think I have a sense of what
yeah,
then
saying.
Okay, so the options that were presented was agree with the themes and wish and ask asset to proceed with developing an action plan to align asset with these concepts, absent us meeting together again, correct?
Correct.
Disagree with the themes and change them, or have another joint funders meeting. So I think you're looking for that kind of direction tonight. Which way do we want to go? What's your direction, Council?
well, I would move the alternative to confirm the themes and direct staff to work with the other funders to develop an action plan to align the asset process with these concepts, with an interpretation of our conversation to address the language issues that we discussed.
I'll second.
Is there a second? All right.
Second.
Rachel, did you capture that? Okay. All right. Discussion. All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Okay, we need to back up now, and we need to have, under 33A, a motion on resolution approving FY 2019-2020 contracts at human service agencies.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Discussion?
Why is there $1 being removed from the volunteer center? That just seems very
A
odd.
rounding error.
Well, if we had $1,423,000 for $1.423498 to work with, and I think we could have maybe given it to them. But so the volunteers allocated everything that they had, and it just sometimes shakes out that way.
Okay, you ready? Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 And then we need a motion on resolution approving asset policies and procedures.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Aye.
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 All Very good. Anything else tonight, Brian?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 34, Healthy Life Center.
Yes, tonight we're reaching a true crossroads in our evolution of the project for the Healthy Life Center. I want to give you some update on information that I promised you before you move ahead to the next step. As you recall, and this little bit of background information, not only for you, for the public, but we had to adjust the original cost estimate for the project based on 2020 dollars, and we took into account some projected reductions in costs from the project too. If you remember, we actually offered about $5 million. The council was, I think, wise in saying you didn't want to in any way diminish the quality of the building. So you've accepted us looking at $2 million of reductions there. So the project cost as it sits now is about $48,609,448. Recall that? So I wanted to show you on table 1 the source of revenue for the project itself. Recalling that Story County was going to put in $2 million, Heartland $3.5 million, Mary Greeley $7 million, donations of $5.5 million from private donations, and it would take $28,609,000 of a GO bond to finance the $48 million 609 project. Now, I think we reminded you before that we're going to need some issuance costs. So the actual amount we're going to ask you to authorize is an amount up not to exceed $29,065,000. And try to point out in the memo, that's about $455,000 in costs related to underwriter's discount, cost of issuance, that's printing and other things, and rounding. Dwayne is here if you have any questions on that. This is a conservative number. Hopefully bids will allow us to, with maybe premium bids, it'll come in less, but we normally put these issuance costs in there's a worst case scenario. So you'll see it's greater than the actual project cost itself. You'll see later on, the good news is Dwayne is, when he gave you the updated cost of that project, he figured in these cost of issuance costs. So the cost of the taxpayer and property taxes hasn't shifted for what we told you before. Just to remind you too, the estimated deficit from this operation, remember now, whenever I give you numbers, remember these are estimates from the capital costs to operating costs. This is based on our consultant report, trying to look into the future 3 years hence. So we hope they're conservative, but I don't want to tell you I don't want you to tell you these are the exact numbers they'll be. They could be higher, they could be lower. But we're projecting operating costs about $555,000, but we have some contracts that we're trying to finalize with Story County, Mary Greeley Medical Center, and Heartland to pay a portion of that deficit. So the net deficit to the city property taxes, we're saying about $405,000 in the first year. Okay. Now on the one table I have on the second page of the staff report, this is the important number for the citizens. We want to tell them, be very transparent, not only the cost of their property taxes for the actual capital cost of the building, but also the ongoing operational deficit of 405. We have that there for you. For a residential property owner, we're estimating a cost of about $44 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. That's based on certain assumptions. Remember, with rollback, we had to anticipate a couple of years in advance as far as the interest rates, and we have to look at our own property tax rate, which will change. But we pro forma it based on our July 1st numbers for this fiscal year, about $44 per $100,000 for residential property owners, and in commercial and industrial, it's about $70 rounded. Remember that? So that hasn't changed, even though we have a higher cost of issuance, the issuance costs included in there. You asked us to go back and develop wording. Dwayne worked with our bond advisor. We have wording that we can actually put on a ballot, and there's a resolution that's attached with more fuller explanation, or a fuller, resolution that's needed if you decide to proceed. But you get the idea of authorizing us up to, it can be less, no more, to really basically construct and equip the facility. Okay. Timing of the referendum, we've changed that. Boy, the state worked on a lot of things this year, did they not? and we were following it very closely. One of the things we didn't follow was a new ordinance that was going to change a new bill that was going to change the actual dates of special elections. So actually, they did pass something that the governor has signed. If we do, we have some options now. If we do certify an election prior to July 1st, I believe we have an option to continue with the August 6th date we talked about, or the September 10th date, which is the option in the new ordinance. I think in discussing this issue with the number of the supporters of the bond issue and our city staff who have to go out now and educate the public, that we would appreciate the additional time. So I think we're recommending that you establish that referendum date at September 10th of this year. I think that adds another positive aspect to this. Some people were starting to complain. I was hearing some rumblings that we were trying to schedule an election where a lot of people were on vacation. As you know, a lot of people return to Ames after vacation by August 15th. University begins. The high schools are in session. So actually, September 10th, we can assure that most people will be back in town for the election, which I think will be positive. So remember the September 10th is what we're trying to set the election at. Now, to be as transparent as possible, all projects have risks, so I didn't want to overburden you with risks, but we try to think of everything that could possibly happen on this. So I've outlined a number of risks you've seen before. A few more were added. I don't know if you have any questions on it. 3-year pledges, rather than having all the money banked up front. So there's a bit of risk that maybe all the pledges won't be redeemed over the 3-year period. Contract duration, the 3 parties, we had hoped that the 3 major parties would be in as long as the project was in place. Heartland is committed to that as long as the operation of the facility is in place, that they're going to participate in support of the project. But as you know, Mary Green Medical Center wanted to cap their obligation for 15 years after the facility first opened. Story County in our negotiations wanted to cap theirs at 25 years. Now we can extend it past that time, but it takes mutual agreement to do that. So if you want to be guaranteed their participation in the projected deficit, we have a 15-year cap and a 25-year cap with 2 of the partners. So you ought to be aware of that. So there's a little bit of risk there if it continues on and we lose that money, that support. The deficit, kind of the similar situation here. 2 of the funders have capped their contribution. That's Mary Greeley and Mary Greeley and Story County. So if during a year, even when we have within the terms of the agreement, if our deficit is greater than this 404, we could, being the city of Ames, will have to pick up the difference in it. Future capital improvements, I think I told you before that rather than go back to the funding parties here and ask for major capital expenditures when a roof needs to be repaired or some major renovation of a parking lot, as you know, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rather than go back and ask for special appropriations, we're going to try to handle this through the ongoing operations. So as part of our annual expenditures, we're going to try to raise, starting the first year, $300,000, and every 5 years it's going to increase, maybe $325 to $350. That's part of the ongoing operations. But should we have the need for a capital improvement, and we don't have in that fund sufficient funds to pay for it, it is a city building, right? A city building owned and operated, so we either have to delay that much needed capital improvement if possible, or we'll have to pick up the difference in a capital improvement. We were concerned about dealing with the state legislation that was going to cap city governments, and you want to keep giving credit to Mayor Hala here, who I believe single-handedly was able to rally a lot of the mayors in the state to deal with this legislation. The one that was passed is substantially less onerous on the cities than it would have been. It does, I tried to attach, Dwayne gave you an analysis of that. There are some extra steps required. There is an ability to protest that could happen. Interesting enough, that protest has been in place for many years. That was available to people before that. I attached that to Chapter 24 of the state law that allows for a 3-person group out of the state to actually hear these protests and make unilateral decisions on what happens to us. So it is a bit of a risk, but it's been a risk for all of our budgets for many, many years in terms of that legislation. As far as the authorization of the land, site's very important. You know, we have a street site on Ontario and Shoal Road. I did receive a letter today. I've been working with the president and Pam Kane. If you look on the dais, you have a letter from the president of the university voicing her support for this site for the Healthy Life Center and assuring that she will be making a recommendation to the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents will ultimately have to make this decision. They will not hear this until August. They will not make a final decision in August. She intends to recommend those support of it. So that's good news, but it's a bit of a risk. We're going to be educating people about a project on a site that we hope the regents will follow the recommendation of the president, but we can't be assured of that. But I think the president's pretty confident that if any past history is any indication that they support her recommendations on these kind of leases. So you'll see that letter from the president. I want to emphasize, just like we had with the other site, meaning our Firmin Aquatic Center, we have not performed an environmental study on this site. I do believe it's been studied a lot of times because there was concern about university property, especially around the reactor site. So in the agreement that I've proposed to the university, I've asked them to produce any environmental studies by September 1st so we can see if there's any issues related to this site. Another bit of risk is when we move ahead with the project, the way our agreements are laid out is that the three funding bodies, being Mary Greeley, the county, and Heartland, will only be required to deposit their share of the capital money to build it if and when the council executes a contract to proceed with a contractor to build the building. Now, in order to get to that stage, we're going to have some design work done. Quite frankly, that could be in excess of $1 million to design the building, to take the bids to know whether we're in or out of the project. If for some reason, and this has not happened before, because whenever we bid something out and it came in higher, we rejected the bids and worked with the contractor to try to reduce the cost. But we're talking about a substantial building here of almost $48 million. We may not be able to reduce the cost, or if we are, you may not want to accept the reduction in the quality of the building, as you already told me, and therefore we wouldn't proceed with the project. We would have incurred the design costs and be liable for them, not the other partners, but we would pay for that if you decide not to move ahead with the project. Now, we've got a little bit of good news. We've been working very hard. Mark, the city attorney's helped me and put together agreements, and we've worked to get agreements out. So we have agreements out to the university. They'll have to take their lease agreement through their staffs, both the attorneys for the university and the Board of Regents. I tried to pattern it after our current agreement on the Firmin complex, so I hope that we can move quickly to get this approved, but you never know. We do have agreements out to Story County. Now, Story County did approve this morning the agreement for the project. We had to negotiate a little bit, so as I think I told you before, they are going to contribute the $2 million over a 3-year period. They will pay us $100,000 towards our operation costs, inflated 3% a year, but it's for a 25-year life, not forever, okay? So that has been approved today, so that's good news. Also, Mary Greeley, we have a contract out with them. I don't have a copy of it, but I've been informed that the president and CEO can sign that agreement, and I think he has signed it. I don't have the final copy yet, but I have indications that they'll agree to our terms, and they will put in the $7 million. Now, there's going to be a little bit different. We're going to pay them the way they pay construction projects. So when we let the contract, there'll be a certain percentage you'll see in the agreement. When we have substantial completion, we have occupancy. So you'll see that's a little bit different. And then they'll pay us $105,000 flat a year for 15 years, and that's increased 3%. So that's good news. And then we've submitted a contract to Heartland. They submitted to their attorney, and I just received their comments, and I'll have to get with Mark. I think they're asking for some tweaking that's not substantial. That's clarification. So we don't have a signed agreement on that, but I'm confident that we'll get that done. Now, tonight, I'm not asking you to approve those agreements. We're going to come back at a separate time to approve it, but I think you wanted to know where we are in those agreements before we take the next major step. So I think that's all good news. that I'm able to report to you. So you're going to have to decide now, we're at this crossroads where you want to move ahead and pass a resolution. I think we have some wording. There's a resolution and the wording on it, and it's set the date of, so you're going to authorize the referendum with the wording that we have, and also set the date of hearing it September 10th, I think, of 2019. So I apologize to keep repeating this, but this is a major project, and I wanted to make sure both you and the public knows the ins and outs of this particular transaction, so nobody is surprised. And again, these are based on our best estimates at the time. The world can change, interest rates can change, construction costs can change, but this is based off our concept study that we had from our consultant. So do you have any questions before we proceed? It will clarify something.
I have one. So am I mistaken in recalling that the state legislature passed a cap on property tax increases, or is because this is like a bond issue that is like a referendum, is to avoid that? I guess I'm just a little bit confused.
I've attached the analysis from the finance director. Basically, it does not affect debt service, so that's the payment of the bonds.
Okay.
Where it will affect us is the operating deficit, the 404, because that's included in our general levy, and therefore this new legislation affects that. But quite frankly, if I look back at the last, I don't care, 30 years perhaps, it would be difficult for us to come within the 2% cap that they have on us now. So probably even without the Healthy Life Center, it would kick in this new law. The new law will require anything over 2%, and that's 2% of revenue, not expenditures. 2% of revenue. You'll have to probably have an extra hearing. You'll probably have to have a supermajority vote from the city council. So 5 votes to pass the actual budget itself. So debt service, which is voted on, this referendum, it won't be impacted by this new legislation. The operating deficit would, but we have some procedures that allow us to work through that and make this project eligible each year.
Gotcha. I'm very excited for this project. One of the big things I hear from students, especially graduate students, is that childcare services are extraordinarily lacking. And so the Healthy Life Center and many of the things that are coming with it are great.
Let me clarify, just so that you know, the service we're providing is just a drop. There's a classification for state law. It's a drop-off center for participants there. It's not an old age, it's not a separate childcare service. You need certain certifications, a higher level of certifications. So it's the people who come for an hour or two who are going to have their have children, so it allows them to participate in exercise or rehab or whatever. But it is not to compete with one of the childcare services that are throughout the city. Okay?
Understood. Gotcha.
Make sure they understand it. So, good question, though.
But there's certainly married students with children that would be able to take advantage of this, that ISU facilities don't offer this at all. So I think it's definitely a plus.
Yeah.
Other questions for Steve?
I have 2 questions. First, we were just talking about the super majority. This is something I never drilled down to before because I thought I knew what it meant, but I'm not sure when I think about it. Is it going to be, the memo here says it's a 2/3 super majority, which would be our ordinary 4 out of 6 wins. But you just said 5 out of 6. So
I need clarification. That was my understanding, was 5 out of 6. Anybody, Dwayne, you?
I mean, we just got this bill and we haven't got all the direction, but it did come out 2/3 majority, and that's a super majority for some councils.
Right.
It's not for us because we have the 6. And it's actually, the process is going to be, you'll vote on a maximum levy first. And that's what's going to require the 2/3 majority. And then if you pass a budget that's within that maximum, then you just need a simple majority to pass that. But effectively, that's going to limit you.
So are you saying it's 4 or 5?
It's 4, I believe, would be the 2/3. Right.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
And my second question was, we have before us alternative 1 would be to march ahead with setting the election and authorizing the bond and so on. But you also told us that we have some contracts that aren't really quite done yet. And so if we move forward with that first alternative to move ahead and something goes terribly and unexpectedly wrong with those contracts in the next few days, would we still be able to sort of unwind?
Well, I'm pretty confident that the three contracts are the partners. I don't believe anything is going to fall apart. So then the only other contract that's outstanding is the university, and we won't know that until August. I'm not sure exactly the date, August. Now, we have to certify, you could pass this tonight and the clerk could hold certification, but not past July 1st, right? If we go, we could hold past July 1st, I believe. Let us do the September 10th meeting, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. But according to state law, Diane told me today, I think it's July 23rd or something is the last, 26th, where we have to certify to get on the September 10th meeting. That won't help us know whether the states, the Board of Regents have passed it.
Sure.
But we don't have to certify it right now, and we could probably hold it a little bit of time. But I'm sure we'll get the three contracts done. I don't know if we'll know if we have the site in place.
So is it your intention to wait a little bit about the near-term contracts
Yes.
before certifying? Okay,
Yes.
that answers my question.
But the risk is the state. The Board of Regents site, which is very important, obviously. Now, remember, this authorizes us to issue the bonds. It doesn't force us to move ahead with the contract or even issue the bonds. So we don't have to incur costs or issue the bonds. That's why we probably would do the design work first, and we'll have some cash flow. We'll have our own money to pay for the design work before you incur a cost with a contractor, obviously, if it's, it comes in higher. So we have some flexibility with cash flow.
All right, questions for Steve? Okay, I will open public comment. Is anyone in the audience that wishes to address council on this particular topic right now? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and council. Further discussion or entertain a motion?
Move alternative one.
Which
Second.
is,
Move forward with the Healthy Life Center as projected.
okay, so it'd be the resolution on the calling for election to be held on September 10th, 2019, and proposition of entering into a loan agreement as set forth in the agenda. Is that correct?
Correct.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Keith, you have something else?
Corey, right here.
Yeah.
Aye.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah, just one last thing. I'll maybe give the.
By the way, that passed unanimously, so.
by the way, there was one other one I wanted to tell you. Remember the committee that was going to raise funds did a great job, remember? But the number was reduced to 5.5 million. I've got all the signed or copy of the pledges to Dwayne, and I think we verified that there's at least $5.5 million in signed pledges. There may come a few more thousand, but that's been accomplished too. So that's good news.
Great.
So the last thing to just going to hand it out to the council real quickly is informational brochure for the Healthy Life Center. There will be a PowerPoint that will go along with this that we'll do in public presentations, and we have a number of those that are scheduled, which are on the website. But I'm hoping to send this to the printer tomorrow, so we can get a proof and get things moving forward. So if you do have any comments, let us know as soon as possible. But just a little bit overview of what the Healthy Life Center is. You get the diagrams and then some of the financial information on the back. And again, the PowerPoint will go into more detail of all this information so we can educate the residents before they vote.
Keith, I'm on the City of Ames website dealing with Healthy Life Center. Are we planning on updating that to incorporate some of the new material that Steve has given us? I just want to make sure that's kept up to date for people who are wanting more information.
Yep.
Is there any value in saying where people are going to be able to vote at on the brochure or not? Or is that not normally on an informational
You
brochure?
know, there's only so much information that we can put in there. So, so right now we weren't looking at that, but we will share that information
on the website then.
Yep.
Now, remember, we'll be out educating the public, though, as always the case, hopefully for one of our projects, there'll be a Friends of the Healthy Life Center. They'll go out to, and they're the ones who will help with a campaign to vote yes. You'll see yard signs and things like that. That'll be all done by an outside group, not by the city of Ames. Our job will be to explain the importance of it, why we think we need it, and the benefits of it, and try to educate the public. But there will be a friends group that you'll hear about. I think will be active in trying to help promote the bond issue passing.
Outstanding. All right. Anything else?
It's a beautiful brochure.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 35, staff report on Campus Town Facade Grant request.
Good evening, City Council. This is a short staff report in response to a request you had to reinitiate the Campus Town Facade program during this fiscal year. We usually do this once a year, and we did that in February of this past winter and got no takers on making an application. What we're saying is that there's a large amount of funds left in the program. It's not a question of waiting until the next fiscal year. It's a question of whether you want to take the step of reinitiating the process. If that's of interest to council, we would move ahead with that in June and take applications just as we would anybody else, not targeted to one property or one interest. It'd be for the whole area if we move forward.
Okay, questions for Kelly?
Kelly, the $120,020 balance, does that represent 2 years worth of the funding for this program then?
You funded at a rate of $50,000 per year, so you're at 120 now, and another 50 will show up on July 1st. You'd have 170,000 on July 1st.
I would move.
Okay, goodness. See.
Oh, sorry.
See. All right. Open public input on this. Is there anyone in the audience wants to address council on this topic? See none, close public input.
I would move that we reopen an application window for the Campus Town Facade Grant Program.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Discussion?
I'm opposed to this because we have a protocol for distributing money. Similar to the asset process, there are situations where an agency will come with an emergency request where we deviate from our policy. By doing this, we set a precedent for other situations where someone comes along and they have a project, and if we didn't have any takers, all of a sudden we're back now reopening the process. The delay is short-term until the next round comes along. I think we need to think long and hard about the precedent we set and how we administer city funds. The applicant is a former city council member. We shouldn't do things just because. I hope that's not the driver of this, but we need to be consistent how we administer these programs. So
I guess I didn't know. So I think that Matthew asked on behalf of someone, but I don't think.
It doesn't matter. I mean, there's nothing here that explains there's any kind of emergency justification for this. I think we need to stay with the procedures that we have.
Kelly, do we have 2 rounds for the downtown, don't we?
Correct.
And we only have 1 round for Campus Town.
Correct.
Okay.
That was intentional because of the smaller number of buildings that are in Campus Town versus downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Tim, you raise a number of valid points. You know, I think I would feel differently if the funding were short at all, but in fact, we've got several years rollover. I'd feel differently if in February we turned anyone down. I think in a case like this, we have these funds available to help businesses in Campus Town. And it seems to me that, staff says it won't push anything else off, their to-do list or anything like that. And so it seems
Just
reasonable.
remember, how are you going to turn down the next one? I mean, that's the reality when we deviate from this. And it would only be a few more months until the next procedure comes along. So whatever the council wants to do, but I'm opposed to changing the rules midstream. If we want to change the policy and have two separate rounds, that's another matter. I would be supportive of looking at changing the policy, but not making an exception to this.
So do we have, and I guess maybe we just place a bookmark in this for a future discussion, but we have all this rollover money. Do we need to start thinking about this whole program?
Right. You need as much, you want to reallocate more to downtown or make it eligible for other things.
Yeah, and totally fair points, I think, to
Yeah.
look at that. If this money isn't being used on a regular basis,
I guess I'm in the same camp that you are, Bronwyn, that this is there to help the businesses in Campustown. And since we only have one grant round and we've got, two businesses that are interested right now, I am not opposed to doing this. But I do think we should be revisiting the whole policy. And I'll remind everybody that we've got that question of business improvement grants for downtown. We could be looking at that for Campustown as well, if we ever got that out of the parking lot of the planning department's work plan.
Okay. Yeah, for discussion?
One thing that we could do in this case in order to address the unwelcome precedent issue is to, if we were to approve this, then we could say that our policy going forward is to, in the Campustown program, to award at most one round of grants per year, right? So that if someone comes again in 2 months and asks us to open it up again because there's still money in the fund and so on, that we wouldn't be inclined to do that.
Why? We just opened the door.
No, because I'm saying we could adopt a policy that says we would not open the door any further.
So then we allow this one and then we pull up the ladder and don't allow any others. It seems like if you're going to approve this one, then you should say it's open season. If there's money there, someone comes along and they have a project, they should be allowed to open the door to another round, just like this one is.
I don't think that's necessarily the case because, again, I go back to downtown and we have 2 rounds for downtown. This would be a second round for Campustown. So
that's the most compelling reason for my support of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why they would be any different, really.
Well, may I suggest we'll vote on the motion and then under council comments, if you want to go ahead and have recommendation to change the policy or have staff work on changing the policies, you have 2 rounds of grants or whatever, just to try and make it equal as an option as well too. I think we taught this one enough. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Okay. Item 36, staff report regarding public and employee safety on city properties.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You might recall that following the death of Celia Burkina Rosamena, city staff met to explore how to improve safety on city property and around city buildings. What I thought I might do for you briefly, I know you've all had the report, but for the benefit of people listening at home, I might hit just a few of the key areas mentioned in the report. And then Joshua Thompson and Keith Abraham are here tonight to discuss the implications for parks and trails in more detail. They've done a lot of work on this, and I think both you and the public will be most interested in the work that they're getting done. But let me mention just some of the clusters of discussions that we had and actions that we're taking. And let me start with vegetation management. We talked a lot about vegetation on city properties as well as private properties in ways that we could address areas that either are secluded, feel secluded, or create opportunities for criminal activity. Some of this is the vegetation management activity that Parks and Rec will look at, but there are other things that we can do, like some enhanced patrols and enhanced staff presence in our parks. And then some things where the public can join us and help us. And in that vein, I think one of the ones we'd like to see happen is expand our program of safety walks. Some of you have participated in the safety walk in Campustown that's become an annual tradition. I think there's some other neighborhood parks that could benefit from that kind of engagement and that kind of attention from the folks who live in the area. Another important area of action for us is a more coordinated effort to reach out to the homeless in our community. We're grateful for a partnership with the Emergency Resident Project and some of the social service providers. They banded with our Safe Neighborhoods team, and we have a regular program of outreach to some of the areas where we suspect people may have a camp. And then we're engaging other city staff in helping us watch for, recognize those areas so that if somebody sets up shop, we can get there and help those individuals bridge into more supportive services and safer living circumstances. We talked a lot about crime prevention through environmental design. I've been in front of the council over the years talking about these principles. They've helped us make buildings safer in the police department. We've really come to believe in these ideas over the years. You'll see some of that reflected in what Josh and Keith show you. And it was clear in our conversation that there's an appetite for these ideas, and we'll look for ways that we can do some workshops with staff who manage or create new projects, and then try to use our community resource officer and see if there's an appetite for some public education around those principles. They're fairly simple, they're straightforward, but they have the net effect of making our neighborhoods, our homes, our communities safer if we put those into practice. We talked about security cameras, we talked about lighting, and looked at areas where we may need to use those tools as we encounter hotspots or problems. Those are resources that are increasingly available to us and part of the menu of solutions we can apply. We took a closer look at City Hall, pulled together an independent City Hall Safety Committee. This building is used by lots of different people at all hours of the day and night. And we have some more work to do to try to ensure that it remains open and accessible, but we maintain some sort of security presence and control over those spaces when it's not set up for public meetings. So that group is meeting. We look forward to the impact of a keyless entry system that'll give us some better control. But I think already our initial steps have led to some more coordinated efforts to manage open spaces and closed spaces of the building. And then the last one I'd like to just touch on is a proposal to do an internal safety hotline that rings on the desk or rings into a recorded line on the risk manager's desk. And it's one of those things you hope the phone never rings, but for the city employee who sees something and it's not gotten attention, it doesn't seem to be moving, and they're frustrated and they think it's dangerous, this gives them another avenue, another outlet to somebody who's outside their chain of command. It can draw attention to those things that sometimes just get caught in the wheels of bureaucracy here. So it may not be something we use a lot, but it seemed to be that added touch that would give employees a chance to act on those things they might see. I'd really like to turn to Joshua and Keith and give them a chance to show you the work they've done in the park already and some of the strategies that they look to employ in our green spaces.
Thanks, Chief. Good evening. After the incident that took place last fall, what Parks and Recreation did is we went out to the site or near the site of where the incident took place and surveyed what needed to get done. What did we need to do? We needed to increase and raise the canopy on a lot of the trees that were in the area. Also reduce a lot of the vegetation that was between, in the report talks about between 2 and 6 feet in height. A lot of that vegetation was invasive vegetation, which I'll discuss later. I talked with Story County Conservation. We also and borrowed a piece of equipment from them, rented a piece of equipment from a local company here in Ames. Determined that the equipment that we used, just like this one, was very effective. And thanks to the City Council, we put it in the amended budget to purchase that equipment, and we just received that piece of equipment basically exactly like that last week. And actually, I got to sit in the skid loader today and use it and operate it just to make sure this is what we wanted. And staff was very pleased as well. So we purchased that piece of equipment. Then we also purchased another piece of equipment that's used for sloped areas. We'll use it in ditch areas, but it's a pretty beefy, for lack of a better term, piece of equipment that can take down large brush. The previous picture could take down trees up to 6 inches in diameter. This can do very similar to that, but it's great for sloped areas. So thank you for providing the funds to purchase those. So after we cleared that area, it took about approximately 2 weeks. We met with staff and determined, okay.
Do you want to show some of these first?
Yeah, sure. So this is the trail on South 4th where the incident took place. You can see kind of before and after. And I can hand these out afterwards. But you can see the fall 2018 picture, how all the vegetation is really encroached on the path. And then the spring, I took those this morning, the spring of 19, how we widened the corridors and what it looks like today. This is the path that goes south of South 16th towards Vet Med. Really opens it up. If you get the opportunity to go look at the trail and walk on the trail, it's more inviting. It's very pleasant to be on at this, now. Now we're in a point on these trails where we just want to maintain them. We don't have to go in there and take such drastic measures to clean up all the trees. So this equipment that we purchased will allow us to do that. So next steps, we met with staff and we looked at all of our park system. We looked at all the public areas that we maintain on a regular basis and said, okay, where are we seeing individuals that are camping out for long periods of time or even short periods of time? Also, what are some path corridors that we need to address, do similar actions that we did on South 4th, or on the trail between South 4th and South 16th. And then also, let's look at areas within our park system that could be sites for camping areas. So this just gives a quick snapshot of we have Brookside Park is on the north side and then goes all the way to Stuart Smith. I kind of X'd out, just for tonight, I X'd out other areas of the park system, but just to give you a quick snapshot. So just for instance, at Brookside Park, there's 3 shelters there that we reserve on a regular basis throughout the summertime. Those yellow dots represent individuals that have stayed overnight there. We have staff that encounter those on sometimes a daily basis. They're just there for the evening and then they leave during the day. The red area at the top is a woodland that's in the Brookside Park. That's a potential area. We don't see individuals in there regularly as far as staying overnight. And then the blue line depicts, okay, we need to widen these corridors. We need to take care of some of this vegetation. So we talked about all those areas with staff. And then the next thing we talked about is, okay, what are we doing on a daily, weekly? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to add, one of the other things that we did do is we did have a police officer came in and talked with our staff, because one of the things that we have found is sometimes we encounter things and we don't necessarily share with police, or sometimes police see things and they don't necessarily have, we don't have that kind of back and forth conversation and letting the right hand know what the right or left hand is seeing and doing. So we had an officer come in and it was really good conversation to say, hey, if you see these things, let us know. And sometimes it's also because at Brookside, what Joshua was talking about, sometimes what happens is individual will go and they'll unscrew all the light bulbs. And so if you go by, for the police officer, if you go by Brookside or one of our other parks and you see that a shelter is not illuminated, there's probably a good chance that somebody might be there or something's going on. So that I think was a key component of having these conversations with staff and bringing an officer in to really create that dialogue, and for our staff to say, hey, it's okay if you see it 5 times, call us 5 times. Don't worry about it, because we want to get to find out what's going on and have a better feel for what's taking place throughout the community.
Exactly. Yep. Thank you, Keith. And then we also talked about what do we do on a daily, weekly, monthly in our parks. We know we're going to the shelters pretty much every day. We're going to the bathrooms or cleaning the bathrooms every day. We're mowing every 7 to 10 days. We're looking at lights. So we developed a spreadsheet. Okay, this shows the amount of times that we're in the park throughout a week. But there's areas that were obviously missed.
Okay, and so we identified, okay, where are we not visiting these areas on a regular basis? For instance, East River Valley Park, it's across the river from Carr Park, the old Carr Pool site. We go there and mow that every couple weeks, but that's one area that we saw a camp there in fall of 2017. So we are working on getting to those areas on a regular basis, whether it's, twice a month, whether it's, on off periods when we're not mowing, based on what we're doing as far as staff, but also communicating with our staff, full-time and temporary staff. Hey, if you see something that's not right, that's out of place, let us know so we can address it and take care of it. And also, one thing that's come about from this whole thing is our residents, our patrons have become more vigilant of what's going on. We get a lot of people that email us. They use Park Watch is what we promote. That let us know, hey, we saw something that might have been out of place. Can you check it out? Or contact the police department. They'll take care of it. So, and then also, Keith kind of alluded this to a little bit, but Brookside, we're going to be redoing the restroom. There's a couple features in there that we're looking at as far as offering skylights. So if an individual is there during the middle of the night when park is closed and the lights are on, a police officer can drive by and say, hey, there's skylights glowing, what's going on there? We need to go check that out. Also with Homewood Clubhouse, that's going to be hopefully we're going to be replacing here soon. We're doing the same thing with that. Make sure we have enough exterior lighting. We're going to have cameras that are going to shine on the outside. So those types of things that we're looking into. Another thing that we're looking into is invasive species. There's 2 points with that. The invasive species crowd out native species, which we like. We like the native species. Invasives we want to get rid of. And a lot of the areas that we're talking about here where we need to widen path corridors, a lot of those species that need to get removed are invasive. So we're trying to get a handle on those. Paul Tauke, our city forester, is leading that charge as far as that group, bringing on individuals that are basically subject experts, former faculty, current faculty, and we're starting to get that going. Going to be meeting here soon to get some priorities set, get some management strategies in place, and then determining timelines of when we can do this. But the thing is with invasive species, it's ongoing. It's more than likely never going to stop, unfortunately. And so we're just something that's going to have to be, we're going to have to put it in budgets, figure out what our priorities are going to be, and continue to manage that on an annual basis. But also, we're discussing with our friends groups, we're discussing with other volunteer groups to help us out, help us with that charge and take ownership in some of those areas. And we've had great response from individuals that want to help with those efforts. And then just a high level thing that we're looking into, we haven't had too much discussion on, is these path areas that are in our park system. Developing a designation for those. Are they a commuter route? If they're not a commuter route, if they're a commuter route, do they need to potentially be changed as far as hours? Because our parks close at 10:30. What are the certain standards for those? Do they need to be lit? Things we're looking at too. We'll come back at another time and determine what our policy is or what our standards are going to be for that. But then also if it's a recreational path, what are the standards for that? Is it hard surface? Is it aggregate? Is it just a natural path? So those are things that we've been doing in the park system, communicating with staff on how to be more vigilant of things that are going on. So, did I miss anything? Nope.
So if you get out on some of these paths or get down into Brookside Park and see the rerouting of the path, you'll see already some of the results of the work that Parks and Rec has done in the spirit of these principles. In many respects, we're not the end of this process. We're really at the beginning. The way we think about those paths, the way we think about our park areas, homeless outreach can become a little bit of cat and mouse as we try to connect with people who don't really want to connect with us. So we have things yet to learn. We have things yet to try to execute. But I think the staff came together across city departments with a commitment, with a passion, with a sadness that came out of this incident that we're going to try to turn into a positive direction for the community. So I want to thank the staff who did the work on this, especially recognize Parks and Rec for the commitment their folks made. They have plenty to do already, and to have this overlay on top of it asked a lot of them, and they stepped up, I think, and delivered a very logical, practical, and potentially very effective product for us. There are a couple questions in there. We have this inherent sort of conflict between the city zoning requirements for vegetation as screening and the SUPTED principles, where we generally don't like things to be screened. We like vegetation either to be, less than 2 feet or higher than 7 feet. We like those sight lines in that middle area. I don't know that the world is totally either or. There are places where screening is appropriate and doesn't lead to potential criminal problems, but there are some places where that can cause difficulty for us. So that is one question for you. Would you like to hear more and see more about that particular topic? We also don't regulate vegetation on private property, undeveloped private property, and there's some communities that do. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, we can work with inspections and bring you some more information about what that might look like. And you may have other ideas that we should hear about.
I have a couple of questions. One, you mentioned, you're talking about like screening and the sort of the incongruence in our goals there. I was curious, do you use like a heat map for instances of crime or undesirable behavior in helping determine what the hotspots are? Or do we just suppose that certain areas are hotspots?
No, we do. We do some generally on a monthly basis. Unless we're really busy, then on a weekly basis. The things that we generally map are car burglaries and home burglaries, those things that move around the community. We generally don't have enough personal assaults that it warrants a heat map. The heat map usually has 2 or 3 locations that we already know about.
Okay.
But we do map that, and our patrol officers and Safe Neighborhoods team use that as their touchstone for their patrol time.
Okay. The second question I have relates to your proposal for the internal hotline to the risk manager. So is that something you'd need council direction to do at this time, or you would just go ahead and do that?
I think we can just go ahead and do it.
Sounds good.
We get calls from the public and the police department when they don't know where else to go.
Sure.
And we can usually package that up, get it to the right place, and get things started. It just seemed like maybe another alternative for employees might be a fail-safe for us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the idea. My thought was, and I'm sure you've thought of this already too, and maybe it's already in policies, but that we'd have a robust sort of whistleblower protection that would go with that, because I could see how an employee tries to report something to their supervisor blows them off, and then they report it to the risk manager. Supervisor maybe gets in trouble, then the employee gets in trouble. So I would just want to make sure that is robustly communicated ahead of time, that they'd
This
be
isn't just for
safe.
city employees, so is it?
Well, I mean, in the staff report, it kind of talks about
But we could have it open to.
to give employees another venue, which I like, but I just want to make sure that they would know they're protected from like retaliation or something if they were to.
It's a good suggestion, and we'll figure out how to communicate that. I think one protection is a recorded line that doesn't necessarily even identify the source of the caller, but
Sometimes you can surmise that.
Point well taken. Yeah.
Thanks. I think that was all my questions.
Other questions for?
I have one. So after the tragedy in the fall, I have really appreciated the response from the city in making sure there isn't a stigma behind the homeless populations. And I think you've all done a pretty good job at that. As to the camping spots. Obviously, they're camping there for a reason many times because they're many of them are homeless. What are some of like the changes that have been made after that in giving more resources to homeless populations? I mean, even in my apartment complex, there's a detached, unlocked laundry unit that during the winter, frequently at night, you can find a person who's staying there. I just know that it's something that is more prevalent than some would think, but what are some of the resources that are being provided?
So the partnership between the police departments and the Emergency Residence Project really is the primary resource committed to that. ERP has space, and on those nights when they don't have space, they have resources to rent hotel rooms.
Mhm.
And so in my experience in recent years, we've not turned anybody away. We've found appropriate places for people to live. The challenge is starting the conversation.
Right.
The challenge is finding, it's not always hard to find the camp, but it's sometimes hard to find the camper.
Right.
They may be leaving that location at 5 a.m. So our outreach is very early in the morning, at really around first light. We're out there with the Emergency Residence Project looking in those locations, and then trying to build rapport, trying to understand the needs and the hesitancies, and make the kind of connection then that can bridge that person into housing, but also into kind of the other supportive services they might need. Sometimes that's counseling, sometimes medication management. Sometimes it's often a set of issues. But we were talking about asset earlier this evening. Those asset agencies kind of wrap around that process pretty effectively, and ERP acts as a broker for those services. So we have to do some salesmanship and make that connection.
That's good.
And you got to help us, because if you know somebody's living in your laundry room, and it absolutely happens.
Yeah.
If the apartment manager hasn't called us, give us a call.
Mhm.
We'll
That's good.
We'll
to
get
hear.
there.
Yep. So you'd say it's more of a issue of people not taking advantage of some of the resources they have.
Yeah. I mean, just a hesitancy about the system and the formality and resistance to the rules, and there's a constellation of barriers we have to try to overcome.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But these are experienced people, though, who often are successful at overcoming that. So.
Thank
you. And some folks show up at the library. There's some other places. We spend some time at the library. We spend some time in some other locations, trying to make those connections and build that rapport, and in time get them in a safer living environment.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I know that shortly after the murder, that there was a lot of interface between Iowa State and the city. Is that ongoing with the Iowa State Police Department and Facilities Planning and Management to ensure that those of us who live abutting Iowa State properties can feel that those properties are also being looked at? I know that behind our house, which is the cross-country course, there was an encampment for a long time, a number of years ago.
Yeah. Both Iowa State and the school district were part of our initial meeting, and we didn't catalog their actions the way we did city departments, but I think both of them came to the table with a strong interest in addressing these same concerns. I think everything I've heard from the university tells me that their effort to address this is already in place, and that if you see something and you call them, they'll respond.
Just one other quick question, maybe thought. So this report, I mean, the safety committee talks about taking steps to improve the overall safety of citizens and staff on or around community property, but by overall, it sort of is referring to individual upon individual crime. Like, I don't see anything in here about safety through accidental means, like, this is just an example off the top of my head. In that same wooded area, actually, that's south of the DOT and off in the woods off that trail, there's, I believe it's city-owned property that used to be a landfill there. And there's a lot of trash, exposed out of the ground and things like that. But this wasn't focused on someone hurting themselves in that way, like accidentally on city property through, stepping on a piece of glass in that property or falling into the river or something that we would respond to as a tragedy if it happened. But I didn't see that was necessarily a focus of this. Is that something that we are always kind of looking at, or is it something, that's my question.
No, excuse me, it's a good question. Another thought based on your point is one of the things that we have is called the visibility triangle, where you come into an intersection, you see vegetation that's, impeding sight lines. So that's one thing area that we didn't necessarily address in there, but it's one thing that we're looking at quite often. But also, if we hear about those things or see those things, we have over 1,200 acres in the park system. So it's sometimes we know about certain things, sometimes we don't. And so specifically down there at Squaw Creek Park, there's people that like to go dump things down there. And if we see that, hear it, we go try to address it right away. In regards to if it's out in the woodland, like you said, if it's a dump site, sometimes that's a little bit harder for us to get to. But if we know about it, we'll go look at it and get it taken care of.
Yeah.
So
I was just sort of curious. I mean, it seemed like this is all sort of aimed at safety through crime prevention and not like overall safety, I guess.
Right.
That was my thought.
Interesting.
Other questions or comments? Excuse me. Yeah, regarding the homeless category, you said the last sentence is the effort is not intended or not limited, to city-owned property. Outreach to persons located on private property is included in this effort. Can you talk about that just for a minute? And because to my understanding, there is at least one property owner in town that is actually allowing homeless people to live on the property. And if there is other property, do you have jurisdiction, or how are you approaching that? And that's probably a sticky wicket, and maybe you don't want to get into it, but I'm just curious how because I think we all would agree that, and I think you would too, and it's really this is the big topic.
Yeah.
That was the result, that was the cause of CBA's murder. And so just try and drill down into that, and how are you working together with those private property owners?
So on public property, it's pretty easy. You own it, and you delegate the management of that to the staff, and we engage in management of that, and generally gain compliance through persuasion, but we have both park rules and city regulations we can enforce on city property. So that path is pretty clear. It is sometimes very similar if we have a cooperative private property owner. If someone is camping on their property without permission, has taken up long-term residence, and they don't know about it, but we make them aware of it, they often follow a path very similar to the cities. We'd like to see them move. We'd like to do it in a humane way, help bridge them to safer living conditions. All works out fine. If somebody is resistant to our outreach efforts, somebody is resistant to our efforts to build that connection with them as a property owner, it is a little more difficult. Than we are sometimes looking at or looking for ordinance violations, trespass onto adjacent property, some sort of nuisance standard. We're looking for a basis for our engagement, and sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't. In the very least, if someone is trying to host someone who is living outside of our typical standards in the community, and they intend to accommodate them there, we really push for their cooperation in managing any behavioral problems or any trash or any other kinds of difficulties that emanate from that relationship. And, in a couple cases, we've had good success with that. If you want to stay here, here are the rules. And we try to back them up on that. So however we can, we try to, we really want to get people into a safer living environment. This can be really dangerous for the homeless individual themselves.
Yep.
Make that clear. And if we can get them in a safer living environment, generally the property owner and that person are better off. Sometimes takes a little persuasion again, though.
It was interesting that the chart that you showed, Keith and Joshua, where the encampments are, very common, did not appear to be very many park areas. It was areas that it's along the riverbank.
Correct.
Do we own that property that's immediately north of Squaw Creek? It's south of 5th Street. It's by the Boys and Girls Club. Is that our property?
We do now.
Yeah.
That's right.
We just recently purchased it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You voted on that.
For the new 5th Street. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all the way to the creek? Okay.
Yep.
So my question is, I appreciate the chart that you've gone through the spreadsheet. And so is that going to also be part of the circuit that you're going to be going through? Because, and also you get up to where you have the Halloween.
Yeah.
Which I think that's private property,
Correct.
I believe. That's interesting is that really is a pretty dense area. And that really is where the problem last fall, as you know, came from. So did you want to help?
Well, that whole area is going to look quite different when we do the Fifth
All the way
Street
to
extension.
the Squaw Creek.
So we'll have the big stormwater wetland in that big field next to the Boys and Girls Club, and then Grand Avenue will go south. And so we're buying everything. And tonight you approved the agreement with Cooper, and so we'll own all along the Squaw Creek over to Grand, and that'll enable us to further manage that area and have more ability to get into there and really improve things, though things will really be improved with the construction of the infrastructure project as well.
So that technically become like a park area then, even though it's stormwater management? Or I'm just curious how you're going to get that into your cycle of monitoring. Because I applaud what you're doing and getting more out there, and you have the CSO going out there as well too. So it's just more or less making sure you capture those areas that have been a magnet for that particular activity.
Correct. It's just an area that, once the project, now that we own the project, it's something that we're going to have to obviously check on a regular basis. But obviously when the project is done, continue to check it. And it's going to obviously, like Tracy said, it's going to look totally different. So we don't necessarily know how we're going to be able to access it or maintain it. But it's something that's going to be on our radar.
Only last comment, and just a comment, is when we met with the student government this spring, we did share with them that there was a report coming, that you're working on this. And so if you haven't already done this, it'd be good, maybe just via, Devin, to get that report to the student government leadership and say, here's what's going on. And the city manager and I quarterly meet with President Winterstein, and I'll bring this report and share with her, and also ask the question that Gloria asked in terms of, are they doing that? If you aren't, and if you can also, but the whole idea is that you've worked together tremendously so far, and it's just, and the school district too.
Keep it going.
Make sure that we're all trying to be community-wide, being that, because that Arboretum has got a lot of areas that could be attractive, and you could just have people that need housing that could decide to move there. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. So, in closing, the chief asked council, there was three questions. Is there any direction that you wish to give the team tonight, or just receive the report at this point in time and then revisit it if needed in the month or two ahead?
I'm interested in both number 1 and number 2, but I don't know, since it's, especially number 1 is evaluating the way those two fit together. It seems to me that one makes sense and is definitely something that we should pursue. So I would
Okay.
move
Okay.
that we pursue number one, asking staff to review the zoning code to evaluate the landscaping requirements for their compatibility with SEPTED principles.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Well, I think Chief brought up a really interesting point about there are places where this may work and places where this may work or may not work. So I guess I'm going to be looking to you to come back with us or to us with those types of things, because a blanket doesn't seem to make as much sense as a targeted effort.
Yep. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
A follow-up question on this one. What's the approach for assessing the effectiveness of a change like this? If we were to start to increase our SEPTED requirements, is that something that we can expect to have data on in a few years and say, hey, this actually made a difference? Or is it kind of more, I don't know, theoretical than that?
It is a situation where it's hard to prove something didn't happen.
Mhm.
And so for a community of this size, it is difficult to demonstrate the impact of those SEPTED calls. However, if you were to look at the intermodal center, we worked with a design firm on that to implement a number of SEPTED principles. So the sightlines there are specifically designed to give both public and police patrol visibility into that from a wide variety of perspectives, to pull the vegetation back so that there aren't ambush points and obscure entrances and obstruction to lighting. And if you look at the frequency of our police calls to the intermodal center, it's pretty low. And it's pretty low compared to that kind of transit facility in other communities. So we also see those principles applied to some of the new apartment complexes that are being built and residence facilities, and find that our call volume from intrusion, our call volume from those kind of ambush assaults is way down in those facilities. So it's hard to give you a before and after, but our experience with these design principles is that they really do have an impact on those kinds of sort of opportunistic crimes. And it feels safer, so people like it.
Thanks. Lori, do you want to make a motion on number 2 or not?
Yeah, I would. I'm just debating what investigate developing requirements means. What I'd like to know is what sorts of options we have for this. I don't want staff to start developing requirements, but I would like to know what they see as feasible.
Or what we see as the big problem here. Because, again, if there's not a clear impact, I hate to, go to the work of making new system requirements.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit nervous about investigate developing requirements, which sounds more like we're heading right into what those requirements are before we know what the pros and cons are. So I would move that we ask staff to report on the pros and cons of developing this sort of requirement for private property. So it'd be the requirements for vegetation on private property to be managed to reduce isolated and potentially dangerous areas.
There's a second. All right, motion failed.
I'm just not sure enough about that one to know that we have a real need. Exactly. I mean, if I were hearing that you had a heat map where it's like, yes, this type of vegetation always creates an issue, or this type of, then I'd know what we were sinking our teeth into more. I guess
that's sort of what I was thinking the pros and cons look would get us.
I mean,
Well, this won't be the last time we're going to be talking about this too. So maybe when you get number one back, the report, maybe you're hearing the conversation, maybe you have some other ideas you can bring back to us, Chief, and certainly Keith and Joshua are doing a great job, on the park system. I mean, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I'm sure for the in the months ahead. So
And I want to make sure that the pendulum doesn't swing so far in response to this that we're outlawing trees in Ames and no shrubs.
Yeah.
I mean, that would really solve the problem, but then we wouldn't have any trees and shrubs. So there's another ditch we can fall into. So I think going with number one seems like a good first step.
all right, anything else? I was going to move on. Thank you very much for your efforts. Well done.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Move on to hearings. In lieu of going through these in-depthly, I think I'm just going to say, does staff have, does council have any questions on item 37 on the final amendments to fiscal year 2018-2019 budget? Is there anything you want to point out in particular?
No, I just, it's the regular amendment process. I think we talked about this before. This final amendment, we're just picking up some things that happened between now and March and anything that's new business. What I do want to point out, though, we've added another item, and that's 37B. I know you're not to that yet, but I'll quickly go over it. That's where we have to list out the transfers between funds, and this was another item that went through the legislature this year. They were just asking for us to do the ones from a certain date forward, and then they'll be part of the budget going forward. We've always budgeted these. We've always had all the detail on this, but now we'll just need to list them out. Been some other cities have been kind of moving things around, but this will not be a big issue for us. But it will be an additional item that you'll see every time we do budgets going forward.
Okay. All right, I'm going to declare the public hearing on final amendments to fiscal year 2018-19 budget to be open. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, close the public hearing, entertain a motion on resolution amending the current budget for FY ending June 30, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Roll call?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Entertain a motion on resolution approving the 2018-19 and 2019-20 transfers between funds.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 38. Staff, does council have any questions for staff on this at all? Okay, I declare the public hearing on Unit 7 turbine generator overhaul for power plant to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, I'll close public hearing and entertain a motion accepting report of bids and delaying award of contract.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Item 39, hearing on boiler maintenance service contract for power plant. I declare that public hearing to be open. Does anyone in this audience wish to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion accepting reported bids and delaying award of contract.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Item 40, I declare the public hearing on the 2017-18 Downtown Street Pavement Improvement Project, Main Street Alleys, Duff, Douglas, Kellogg to Burnett to be open. Anyone here that wants to address council on this topic? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Any questions for staff?
I have one.
Okay.
Tracy, are we planning to put in any pervious pavement in any of these alleys?
Not on these alleys. We have done it in other parts. We're having some mixed reviews on it kind of breaking up and not being as solid. So with all of the old foundations right there, we're going to forego it on this project.
Thanks.
Any other questions for staff? All right, I entertain a motion on the resolution approving final plans and specifications and awarding the contract to Construct Incorporated of Ames, Iowa in the amount of $211,973.20.
So moved. Second.
Moved, seconded, discussion? Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Item 41. Need to reopen the hearing on Tea Garden drainage improvements, which is continued from April 23rd, 2019. Are you going to take care of that, Tracy?
Yes, so we are still continuing to negotiate the easements. We thought we'd have them settled by now, and we're so very close. Continuing conversations even tonight, and so we would ask that we continue that hearing until the next meeting. Bids were good for 60 days, and then we'll see where we are at the next meeting, and hopefully we'll have everything resolved by that time.
So for sake of clarity tonight, council, what we need is a motion to continue the hearing until June 11th. So the hearing will remain open.
Move that we continue the hearing to June 11th.
Second.
All right. And then we're not going to take action on the resolution, correct, Tracy? We are not going to take action on the resolution on the plans and specifications, correct?
No, not until the next meeting.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion made and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. As a point of order, I've had someone waiting here for over 2 hours. Tracy, you can stay if you want. Is it Annette Larson? Are you here?
No, she left. We talked to her out in the lobby, and she's the one we're continuing to negotiate with.
Okay, good. Very good. Then we'll move on. Thank you. All right. On to item 42, first passage of ordinance repealing rental concentration cap.
Move on first passage.
Second. Good. They're hearing.
All right. Moved and seconded. Questions or discussions or comments for Mark? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Okay. Disposition of communications to council. We have two formal items this evening. The first is an email from Kyle Porman dated May 3rd, 2019. Request to consider a program where full cost or nearly full cost of yearly Ride Pass or Dial Ride was available to disabled low-income Ames residents. Is there a desire to pass this on to staff or not?
It seems like this is something that Ride staff could. No?
In the past, Ride, when requested to give reduced pass for, the board, I think, has taken a position that they're trying to develop a viable transit system. They help in certain ways through Dial Ride, which is a subsidized system along with HERDA, as you know. And that's where they've directed people to, not to come up with another rate structure. Now,
I mean, they do offer fairly significantly reduced rates already to people with disabilities.
now it may be an asset issue or something, or if you want to find some funding for support.
Yeah, and I don't know.
Ride.
I mean, I know there are some agencies who are assisting their clients with that already.
Yeah.
Or the agencies are covering the cost of transportation for their clients
Right.
through their own programs.
Right.
So
So it seems like the sort of thing that he could approach an asset funder with his ideas to sort of get a sense of how the funding agencies are treating this sort of problem. And they could propose a service if the funding agencies wanted to, right?
Certainly. I mean, and I can certainly respond to him too, or John can, but I think if he were maybe a little more aware of some of the programs that are already in existence, because it's not quite as simple as it's, kind of portrayed in his letter, and it's simply because he probably doesn't have access to that type of information, so.
Is there a
That
way
would
we
be my
can have
suggestion, is
staff-
maybe just have someone respond to him and let him know that,
I don't want to just not respond.
Yeah, I
to this.
agree.
Um,
That these things are already happening, and, a lot of people with disabilities who receive Medicaid and who are receiving services from an agency already have a lot of their transportation services provided through that service anyway. So it just kind of depends on who the person is.
So would it be appropriate to ask someone from SciRite to write a letter talking about the existing programs?
Well, given the fact that this was actually referred to city council and to me, I think it'd probably be appropriate for us to respond. We can certainly do some research, or if it's okay
We'll
with you,
combine
I could
all the
work with
information, not just-
Amber and I could chat offline and check with anyone else, and then just get back to them to say, redirect them, and then close the loop on that one.
Okay.
I would agree with, I think I agree with you 100%. I think it's very appropriate. This is a great effort on the part of one of our residents to look out for other residents. I think that needs to be applauded and express appreciation. But at this point in time, maybe there's other ways to help this individual more quickly than we can at this point in time as well, too. So. But I'd like for a motion from direction from council.
I'm sorry, John. Are you wanting to write the letter?
Yeah,
I would move that the mayor respond to Mr. Poorman and express our thanks.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thanks for clarification, Tim. Yeah, I kind of talked in circles there for a second. All right. You have a memo from the Planning and Housing Department regarding the scenic development text amendment, and staff offered 3 different options.
I would move that we put this on the future agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
Do you want to give any comment before they ask us to put it on the agenda?
And the question is it necessary?
You want to guide them to a certain,
I guess if you're comfortable with what we described in option 2 or option 1, I don't know that it needs to get onto an agenda. It would be an applicant initiated text amendment. If you want to discuss more options or the depth of those options, then I would say you should put it on a future agenda.
So if we are interested in 1 or 2, we can make that decision now?
This is kind of a gatekeeper function where you authorize someone to make an application. So you can say the referral can be, we refer the applicant to make an application for either option 1 or 2 as described. We think option 2 serves more customers than option 1, so we would be in favor of that option.
and do you have any problem doing this if it's given to you as far as time, staff time?
It's not really an outreach issue. It's a pretty narrow issue that comes up once or twice a year. We don't really view it as a substantive issue for many people and needing involvement or public engagement beyond the Planning and Zoning Commission process in your public hearing.
Do you prefer option 2?
That's what you said before.
We do, because we've seen this pop up for other users besides senior living.
Okay, there's a motion.
So I'll withdraw that motion.
Okay.
And I'll make another motion, which is to direct staff, to authorize a text amendment.
So I think you're
Option 2.
authorizing the applicant to apply for a text amendment.
Okay, so we're authorizing the applicant to apply for a text amendment that would update both residential and commercial use standards for multiple buildings on a lot, except for 1 and 2 family dwellings. Option 2.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Yeah. I can do it here.
Okay. All right. Council comments. Mr. Devon, we'll start with you tonight.
I have nothing. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for your comments tonight. Appreciate them.
Bronwyn and I both attended the International Town and Gown Association conference with Tashik, and I think we all got a number of things out of that conference that may be showing up here at council comments. One of the things that we heard about was an effort by Iowa City to try and ensure that there would not be discrimination in housing based on source of income, so that people with Section 8 vouchers or somebody who's getting Social Security income or whatever that income might be, doesn't get locked out of housing options. And what Iowa City has done is to add a protected class in their human rights ordinance, which is no discrimination based on source of income. And so my motion would be that we have staff, or actually that we have the Human Relations Commission investigate the possibility of adding source of income as a protected class under our human rights ordinance here in Ames.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So this is a lot to process if we're going to make a major change like this. I would ask that we, maybe give us some time to think about a major change to our, tasking a commission to work through something that this is the first time we've thought about. So I'd be hesitant to add something new.
I guess I thought that's what the commission was for, so that they could work through that kind of stuff and contact Iowa City, see what they're doing, see what is being done elsewhere.
If there's not an initial interest in this, I don't know. It just seems like we should have a more robust conversation before setting out on this, but.
What would your preference be, Tim, to talk about it as an agenda item first before? Or?
Yeah, we're going to change our protected classes. I think that's worthy of our conversation first before asking someone else to take this up. You don't think so?
No, I think it comes from the Human Relations Commission to us. If they don't think it's a good idea, then they tell us they don't think it's a good idea, because they're the recommending body on this sort of thing for our action. This is just an idea that has been enacted in our state, and I'd like to learn more about it, but I think the Human Relations Commission is the body that really should lead on this if they are interested in it. And if they aren't, then
I asked Mark and Brian if you could, do you have any initial thoughts on this one? Brian, you're involved with HRC, and Mark, from standpoint of, you don't want to get too far in the weeds on this one, I think.
Couple of things to add that might help your conversation. The Human Relations Commission is going to meet next week to work on its strategic plan for the next year. They're having a retreat, I think Tuesday, all day, to outline that. I'm not sure how that might play into your thoughts here tonight, but just as a reminder also, so you recently passed third reading of an ordinance removing the investigation function, the local investigation function of the Human Relations Commission from municipal code. So at the moment, we don't have that particular enforcement mechanism for this kind of a matter. But that's not to say there aren't any other ways that we might enforce this kind of an ordinance if this was something you wanted to pursue. We'd have to think about how that would work.
Yeah, and I would just add that I was thinking the same thoughts. So we just repealed the investigative. So what we have is an ordinance now that mirrors the state Civil Rights Act. And so if we're going to add something different to that, we have to think about how are we going to enforce that. But certainly, I think whether you want to discuss it first, or whether you want to send it to the Human Rights Commission to look at first and make a recommendation is really a policy call for you.
It was my understanding, talking with through this process, is that once you go extraordinary measures or above and beyond what state law is, then we have to take on that responsibility for the investigation, what you're saying, right? So we're going to actually have to put back in other measures. And it's possible Iowa City has not rescinded their investigatory portion. I don't know, so.
I don't know either, and it wasn't something we asked, and I think Joel Hochstein was there at the conference with us and was in on,
I think
learning
that you're
about
asking
this,
for
so.
to investigate it to find all this.
Yeah, I want to know what Iowa City's doing and whether that's something that our HRC would think we should do.
All right, so the question, so is that different from the standpoint of staff could even just do just find out what Iowa City's doing versus going through the HRC and having,
I'm not sure if it gets you a different answer, if that's what you're asking. I mean,
we may
either way,
anyway.
we'd gather
Yeah, I
information
think
about
you're right.
what Iowa City is
Sheik will
doing.
be doing it either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I think the question is, do you feel like there's some sort of a value question about whether we should be doing this? Whether that might be more in the realm of the Human Relations Commission to be figuring out the impact, I suppose, in the community. If it's just a question about what does Iowa City's ordinance do and how does that work, how does their enforcement work, that's something that I think doesn't really require that value judgment. That's a pretty quick staff report.
Okay, well, I was following guidance from the city manager, so I can change my motion to have it be staff, but I would like us to look into this. So
I don't.
whoever we think is appropriate.
It depends. I thought it was just investigate, so you'd certainly want to get the input from the Human Relations Commission
Yeah.
too, but after we get I guarantee you, we're going to be doing the staff work against the information. And then do you want the perspective of the Human Relations Commission or not?
I would like the perspective of the Human Relations Commission on this issue.
First, you have to decide whether you want to do it. If you're going to investigate it, I would allow the Human Relations Commission to have some input into or review the staff report on it first. That's what they exist for.
Well, so that's my motion. I already made it.
All right, you want to send the motion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Anything else?
And the second one is a little more straightforward, also arising out of some discussions at the ITGA, but also from other things that we've been hearing. And this is maybe for legal. I'm not sure. Where to hold landlords responsible for nuisance parties.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded, discussion?
I think this is something that has come up in our discussions in the past, but I don't know whether council has directed anybody to actually look into it. And there are ordinances in place in Corvallis, Oregon, and Kent, Ohio, that I know of offhand that do hold landlords responsible. I don't know if we can do that in Iowa or not, so maybe it is, staff being Mark and his legal team.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we can do it.
Okay.
Just to clarify, you say nuisance parties. We were looking at this on what we can do to follow up.
Right.
It may be more than nuisance issues.
Nuisance
Because that could be
issues.
trash, that could
Yeah,
be
okay, so
snow removal.
So
did
I-
you mean just parties or could we broaden that?
I guess I should have just said nuisances.
You want to change your motion?
Yeah, that's fine.
Withdraw it and
Yeah,
make it.
I will.
Huh?
I would be interested in adding
Right.
all of those nuisance.
So
violations.
would that be a friendly amendment?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so, and I would support that friendly amendment.
Okay, so for Rachel's benefit, you want to read the motion back, or for our benefit, make sure we have it clear?
Investigate what is being done elsewhere for nuisances, including
Yeah. It's holding landlords accountable
For nuisance
for
violations.
nuisance issues.
For nuisance violations.
What did you say, Kent and who else?
Kent, Ohio, and Corvallis, Oregon both have ordinances that do that.
This
But I
would
don't know if we can.
This would seem to fit squarely into what we've asked the building department to do with some of the rental stuff. How do these get intertwined?
I don't know
I don't think so.
exactly what they are looking at.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, and.
It feels
I
like
don't-
it's a part of it, but if
I
it's
agree.
not, I
It
mean,
is.
this.
It is related.
this-
Why I want
we should
it.
do that.
Yes, it's related
Yes.
to it. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
But I don't know that we know if it's even legal for us
Right.
to hold landlords.
In this state.
And in what
Yeah.
capacity, if you
Yes.
can, what does that mean?
It'll be us working together with the legal department.
Okay.
Yep.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
David?
Hi, I have two things tonight. First is that we received a letter from Leslie Kowaler on behalf of staff on May 15th. And I would move that we refer this to staff because it concerns a topic that is relevant to our June 18th workshop on rental housing. So I'd just like staff to keep it in mind in preparation for that meeting.
So we say refer just for their information?
Just for their information, and I'd like them to take it into account in whatever appropriate way in preparation for that meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
I don't know what this means.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know,
Don't we just hand it to them and say, here's
Well,
a
they already
letter?
have it. They were included on the email, so.
I don't
All right,
know.
so if you're confident that means that they won't overlook it, then.
No, I just think if we're going to refer it, then we should ask for staff to
Do some-
assess it and provide us with information on whether it has merit or like we would normally.
If they have it, we can assume they read it.
Yeah,
I mean,
Okay,
I don't know what more you want them to do besides read it.
that's all I want them to, I want them to read it and take it into account. And I'm not sure that everyone, would remember every email that they receive on the top. That's all. I just wanted to make sure that it's seen.
Okay, motion and second. Keep it on floor. You want to withdraw?
I'm seeing frowns, so I guess
Okay.
I'll withdraw it. I mean.
All right. All right. Anything else? You got two, you said?
Oh, yes. Our earlier discussion on the Campus Town Facade program, thinking about this, I think that we have enough uniqueness in the circumstance that led us to tonight that if it were to come up again, I think that we would be in a good position to deal with it. So I don't think any further action is necessary, but I just did want to bring up the topic again in case anyone else disagreed. That's all I have.
Okay. Tim?
Two things. Congratulations to the 2019 Ames High School graduating class. We will be very sad to see Spence Evans leaving as principal of Ames High School. Did a fantastic job. These big shoes to fill. And then we had a great turnout for the Memorial Day celebration. It was inside, but it was a good program, and we appreciate everybody who came. That's all.
Chris?
I'm going to step to back to an email we received at the end of March from Tom Randall about the property on the southeast corner of 13th and Grand. And the path forward that I'm going to suggest is maybe get the staff report that was produced when the last time they undertook looking at that intersection, just to give us some background about whether or not we would like to move forward with any other sort of direction on that property.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Would like to see that report.
Mhm.
And minutes probably you want too, the council meetings.
Yeah.
Yes,
that'd
please.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
It was a very robust discussion.
And public input.
And a lot of public.
Imagine.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else?
And nothing else.
Ellen?
I have a few things that I brought back in terms of ideas from ITGA, but I just want to mention them tonight, not make motions. But I want you to know that I might be picking your brains about these topics and that I am sort of interested in them in the future. So I don't need to make motions this evening because I still want to get some input on them. But one of them was I would like to at some point ask staff for a memo on issues related to the concept of micromobility, which pretty much refers to bike share programs and electric scooters, dockless. I want to get info sort of on both those systems, what we think might be appropriate for Ames, what data we might want to collect in order to decide if they might be appropriate for Ames. So I want to get some more of my thoughts organized about what I want to ask staff for, but I might be picking your brains about that topic. And then the other one, and this is one that we'd have to find out what the legality of it is too, but the concept of banning the box came up at the conference. And it's something I've been thinking about how we might see that implemented in Ames, or either at the city level, or what that might look like. So I'll be asking some questions about that, looking into that a little more too. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that those are two things I'll be reaching out about possibly. So.
Pardon my ignorance. What's banning the box?
Yeah, so banning the box would be on a job application when you ask if someone has a prior criminal charge.
I see.
The philosophy is that question being present on an application sort of systematically maintains a system of discrimination, because of course, people of color maybe are arrested at much higher rates for crimes than their counterparts, and so it leads to sort of this systematic maintenance of the way things are. So that's that one.
Nothing for me.
Okay. 2 weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. on behalf of the city, and just a quick snapshot, as has been the case, or was the case last year. I'd say that, first of all, the chamber does an excellent job. Drew Camp does a phenomenal job of getting things organized. He's not here to, hear, but I'll pass it on to him personally. But I think there's actually more benefit in terms of really building and strengthening relationships with people that go on the trip. And so I spent quite a bit of time with Brett Barker and Matt Marsden from Nevada, and very excited about that partnership. Mayor Barker is extremely well-spoken, and we've talked a lot about rural water issues. They have a much more pressing issue. Unfortunately, we kind of got in this infinite loop. It's like, talk to so-and-so, talk to so-and-so, talk to so-and-so, and you're just kind of like going around in a circle. So I don't know, really got a whole lot, but we do have more hearing from that. We did meet with Senator Grassley, Senator Ernst, a couple of representatives, actually Cindy Axney, and he's retiring. Lobsack. Both very articulate, very got a different perspective, got some good perspective on legislation going on in Washington, D.C., and then also a few other agencies. USDA, probably the one that, if anything, scared me significantly is this African swine flu. Over 150 million pigs have died in China, and the United States only produces 120 million pigs a year. So that's the scale of what's going on. And of course, USDA, if that does ever make it to our homeland, this is going to be front and center out here working on it. But anyway, it was, I think it's profitable from the standpoint of really trying to get, also spending time with Supervisor Merkin and Supervisor Olson both went and had good conversations with them as well too. So I think it's important to be building those relationships, and there's some good business relationships as well too. So anyway, if you're interested in more, I can go into more of the summary, but it's I appreciate the candor that Senator Ernst and Grassley, as you ask them something, I said, well, we can't do a whole lot with that, but it's gridlock is and issues are very prevalent there. So, all right, ready for a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
We are adjourned.